Well, hello everyone. Today I want to do another experiment with my new watercolor set. This is the Schmincke Super Granulated Watercolors in the Tundra colorway. I recently did a swatch of this set, and you can see a link to that video in the upper right hand corner. Today we're going to do some circle painting and see how these paints, interact with one another, how they flow when you add just plain old water circles. It's another way to see, just what these watercolors can do. So I've got my paints, my brush, my paper, some water on the side here, a palette, and my towel. Let's go ahead and get these paints out and get started. Alright, I have my paints set out on my palette here, and I'm starting with the Tundra orange. I'm going to just paint a circle here. I've added plenty of water because I find that these super granulated paints love lots of water, and I want these circles, as I add more and more, I want to see how they flow and mingle, so I'm trying to add a lot of water, a lot of paint, so that there's plenty of paint to sort of move around on the paper. And thankfully with this cotton paper, it often stays wet long enough for the colors to mingle and move around over time. So I'm just going to add another circle here of just plain water to see how much this paint likes to draw out when you add a water. And I've touched these two circles just in one spot. I see a tiny bit of drying out here, and I'm going to try to coax the paint out just a little bit more. I know when I work with my Daniel Smith watercolors, some paints just will draw out super quickly, but I'm seeing here that this does not like to draw out very fast. On one hand, that's nice because you can make some really subtle circles that way. On the other hand, it's kind of like, oh, I'm gonna have to do a little bit more work to see if I can get these paints to draw out. So let me try this Tundra pink here and see if it behaves in the same way, where it's sort of challenging to get the paint to draw out from the original circle. So I've got the paint nice and mixed over here. I'm just going to lay down another circle and touch that water circle in just one spot and see what happens. Does the water draw into this circle? Does the purple draw into the water? Do they want to move around at all? So far, I'm not seeing much movement. I might just add a little dab here to get some movement going. Let's see what happens. Just adding a little bit more paint, a little bit more water. Hopefully we'll see a little bit more movement. Yeah, I'm gonna have to do some work trying to get these paints to mingle with one another in these circles. So I'm going to add even more water, even more paint to each circle to see if I can coax them out. Let's add just another water circle here. Yeah, you can see it draw out just a little bit again. Again, it'll be nice to make some sort of really subtle circles, but golly, not a lot of movement going on here. So we have our work cut out for us in this circle artwork here. All right, that's such a nice subtle one. I'm interested to see what that looks like as it dries. Let's go ahead back to that orange. I'll add another one here. It's just a little less saturated. I'll touch it to the previous two and just see what happens if they want to mingle with one another or not. Add just plain water here. Really getting a lot of water into this circle here, this orb. I don't know if any of them are actual circles, so maybe I should call them orbs instead. Yeah, there's a little bit of mingling happening here. And again, not a ton though. All right, let's try another color. Let's go for our blue. This is such a nice bright blue. All right, right, and I'm going to touch it to this water circle that was right here. I see the water is moving right into the blue rather than the other way around. And I think this time I'm not going to paint in this orb. I'm going to let it continue to have some white space in the middle-ish. I'm not going to, completely color it in. That's all I'm trying to say. There you go. Let's add a little bit more paint down here, make it nice and dark. Adding just some water. I'm really having to add a lot of water, a lot of paint to get any sort of interaction going. Let's add it here. And first I'm going to just paint around, and then I'll touch it to the orange and see if I can coax that orange out into the blue. So I'll touch it right here. And instead of having the two circles touch in one spot, I'm going to have them touch in quite a lot of space here. Okay, there we go. I can see that orange drawing out into the blue a little bit more now. All right. It's so interesting to see how different watercolors behave so differently. Again, when I do this with my Daniel Smith watercolors, there's tons of movement. The paint is traveling across the page, whereas this paint, I have to do a little bit more work to get it to interact with one another. But it seems like once they do interact, we get some really interesting effects. All right, what to do next? I'm going to go back to that Tundra pink. Let's see if we can touch it with this blue one here. I'm adding just some more water. All right, I do see that blue drawing out just a little bit into the purple here. I'm going to keep on experimenting and speed this up a little bit for a minute. So I think I'm finally starting to get the hang of putting these orbs next to one another and allowing them to mingle. I got some really good mingling going on here between the orange and the green, the pink and the blue. So now I'm working with the violet, and I'm just adding quite a bit of water here. And I think what I'll do, I see the violet and the pink interacting just a little bit. And I think what I'd like is to add some just really little orbs kind of floating around here. Now they might run into some of the other orbs, they might not, but I'll go ahead and spatter those out, just a few. I'm going to continue on adding some larger orbs. And then I want to add one, I'm going to add this one right here, and I'm going to add a ton of paint to it and see if we can get that effect where I put just a water orb right here and draw it out. Let's see, I added a ton of paint to this previous one. Let's see if it'll come out. Yeah, it looks like it's drawing out pretty nicely. That's so nice to see. I'm very interested to see what this does and how it changes over time. I'm noticing that whereas my Daniel Smith watercolors move very quickly, these sort of morph and change and move over time. So I'm going to add a few of these just water circles right where I see that there's a lot of paint built up, like right here, and see if we can get some of that watercolor that's just sort of sitting on the top, just sort of sitting there in a puddle, to spread out into some subtle circles. So I'm going to continue adding circles and smaller orbs. Some of the circles will be paint-based, some of the circles will be water-based, and I'm going to speed up the whole rest of the process just for the sake of time so that we can get to some mark making. so it's all dry now. And it's fun to see that as everything has dried, we've gotten quite a few really interesting areas. You can see here where all of these blooms have happened, right over here, over here. Oh my goodness, all kinds of movement. It's just lovely to see that as all of this dried, it sort of took on a new life. And it's really exciting. So now we can do some fun mark making on top of this. I have all these different supplies here. Now I may or may not use all of them. It's just one of those, I have them out in case I want to use them. I want to make sure that I don't cover up any of these really beautiful areas, that it's there to enhance my work. So I have out my Pigma Micron 01 in black. I have some Posca markers and a Stardust pen, which I use all the time. It's one of my favorites. I'm pretty sure I'll probably use this one. And then I have this gold pen, in case I want some extra shine or sparkle. And then in case I want to add a little bit more color, I do have these Neocolor 2 crayons that I might try out. So they're just here just in case I want to give them a go. But I think I'm going to start with this Pigma Micron 01. Now I want to make a new orb shape, and I'm going to outline it using my pencil first. And I've zoomed into this area because I thought it would be an interesting place to add my first orb shape. So I'm just going to sort of let my hand create some sort of orb. I'm not thinking too hard about this. Yep, there we go. I think I'm going to take that little tail that I started with and kind of tuck it under. So let me see, I'll go right around like this. Yep, so there's my first orb shape. And I'm going to take my Pigma Micron 01 and I'm going to draw a line from one side of this orb to the other. And I'm going to vary the pressure that I use on that line, but I'm not going to think about it too much. Right now the line looks pretty straight, but given like the bumpiness of the paper and just the irregularity of, typical hand drawing, I'm going to let this line sort of morph over time. There might be areas where I'm pressing lighter, there might be areas where I'm pressing harder and making darker marks. I also noticed that when I'm drawing over the watercolor versus when I'm drawing over just blank white paper, the pen acts differently. So I'm letting all of these little variations sort of naturally shape these lines. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this up so you can see how this morphs over time. the next set of marks that I'm going to add are going to be with my little Posca pen here, and this is the 0.7 millimeter bullet tip Posca. And anywhere where I have these lighter bloom areas, I'm going to just add little dots with my Posca pen. I like adding the white dots on these areas just to sort of, bring your attention to these. These little dots help sort of call the eye to this space and add interest. It's also one of those things that, these are just tiny little dots that you might not see from further away, and it adds interest as you draw closer to the artwork. So I'll go ahead and add them in this area, all along the edge, and sort of fill in these lighter spaces. So taking sort of a larger view, stepping back a little bit from the artwork, I'm going to take these larger Posca pens. I'm going to start with the black one, and I'm going to think about what movement do I see. I see like this curve right here in the circle, sort of starting from that side and swooping down. And so I want to kind of enhance these curves using dots from this larger Posca here. I love adding movement and sort of almost a focal point to draw the eye using these dark marks. But I don't think, they're so intrusive that it takes away from the beautiful colors that we've laid down. So I'm just sort of going to let my hand add these dots, let them sort of meander around the page. I'll add some black ones first and then some white. To finish these dots off, I'm going to go back to my 0.7 millimeter Posca pen and add just a white dot, a little sparkle in the upper left hand corner of each of the larger black dots. This gives just a little bit of interest again to draw the eye to those black dots. Finally, I like to go in and add just a little bit of subtle sparkle. So I'm using my silver Stardust pen here, and I'm making what I like to call lines of lines. And what I love about this Jelly Roll pen is that it's just very subtle. It winds up getting a little bit lighter as it dries, and it just adds a hint of sparkle here and there that you really don't see unless either you're up close and the light is just right, that it's sparkling away at you. If the light isn't just right, it looks like these just really light gray lines. And so this is one of my favorite sort of last touches to add. So I'm satisfied with all of my mark making, and it's time to peel off the tape, one of the most satisfying parts of the artwork. Well, here it is, our final artwork. Let's take a look at it from a few different angles. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I love experimenting with different watercolors and seeing what kinds of effects we can get. I hope you had a wonderful time, and if you go ahead and try these watercolors out, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you again later. Bye-bye.